This is a walkthrough of activity 5-1, creating a shared folder using Windows Explorer. We've done this previously with the profiles folder so that our roaming profiles can work effectively. In order for a folder to be accessed from the domain or from the network, it has to be a shared resource, in other words, made available to the network and given certain permissions for access. So we're going to go ahead and log in. And just a quick note, we got to remember there's a difference between the name of the machine and the domain to which it's ascribed. In this case, this is a domain server, so just remember that the domain is one name that it manages as a domain controller, and the NetBIOS name that identifies the machine on the network is another. And these two things play into our DNS. DNS tracks MAC addresses, IP addresses, names of machines. It's really IP addresses and the fully qualified names of machines on the network. So we're going to start by going into our Windows Explorer, and this is the more traditional way, which is Start All Programs, Windows Explorer. And we're going to create a new share. Now I'm going to deviate from the book a little bit because I don't have a drive D as a hard drive, and it has to be a hard drive. You in theory could share a DVD drive or an optical drive, but you wouldn't want to, because once you remove a disk, any data on there becomes, the share is there, but it's inaccessible, and it would only cause errors for the users. So we're going to look at our drive name swap, and here was a previous share that we had created for the roaming profiles, and we're going to say new folder. We're going to call it apps. It's important to remember that the name of the actual folder on the local machine, the local server, is going to be different than how it's represented as a shared resource. So right click, we're going to say properties, and we're going to say sharing. We're going to say share this folder, but we're not going to call it apps, we're going to call it applications. And we're going to say applications for marketing users. And notice here we don't have a limit, we're just creating the share. Later we will start to employ share and NTFS permissions and start to really crank down on who can do what and who can view versus who cannot. You can do some pretty crazy things. You can exclude viewing while you allow people to actually use it, and that can be for certain reasons. Allow them to drop a file in but not get into the folder so they can then go in and delete the file or change it. That is a discussion for security and policy that is something beyond what the book describes, but it's something you need to keep in mind. You can do many things with this, but for the moment we're just going to create the share. So we have now made this accessible to the network, and I'll undo it in a second to show you what I'm talking about. So the book wants us to go to the command prompt and use the net view. So the command is net for networking, Windows networking, the view argument, and then we're going to ask to see all the shares on this server. Again, this is where the names change come in. The Active Directory domain, or the domain on this, is going to be domain01, but the physical name of the machine is VM domain01. Okay, so we're looking at all of the shares that are revealed to the network users. There are also hidden shares that are not. Those require higher levels of access, higher user rights, and we don't want to give common users those access, but everyone has access to this net login. That's how you can log into the machine. Profiles we created previously. Sysvolume is for Active Directory, for DS services, for directory services. And here's the new one we created, applications. Notice it's not called apps, it's called applications. Now let's go back here. I'm going to do something the exercise doesn't say to do, which is to temporarily undo sharing. So I'll say do not share this folder. And if we ask it to look, we notice that applications is gone. It is no longer a network resource, but I just want to show you that to realize that it has to be shared in order for network users to see it and therefore use it as a resource. I believe we called that, applications for marketing users. come back to our command and our share is back. The book then talks about one or two other ways to look at this, which is just from the GUI. The GUI is just representing what we saw from the command line. And it's going to say to go and run your exe command, which is nothing more than just invoking the actual applet, which is explore.exe. But we're going to browse through the network browser service. Looking at my network, entire network, and it wants you to look at the Microsoft Windows network. Notice we have our two servers, and we'll say domain 01, and this is a server that's ascribed to domain 01, and there is our network share. So if we're to come up here and notice that there's nothing in it, let's say we're to browse directly to it, and I'm just going to create a new, let's say a WordPad file, and we'll call this instructions for marketing cases. And we notice that now we're browsing it. So we're seeing locally, and I'm going to delete it, and notice that it disappears from the network view as well. So this is just to show you that, this is how we share out folders, and therefore we share out anything in those folders. This concludes the walkthrough of 5-1.